Okay, so I'm just about to do a little bit of juicing. I thought I might just record a little bit and share with you what I'm up to, how I go about my business here doing the juicing. Okay, I've got a bunch of things already prepped here. I've got carrot and pineapple and grapefruit, celery, kale, other good stuff. And I'm going to add a couple of apples to this batch. Very nice type of pink lady apples. Very beautiful. See? So I'm just going to cut these up, then I will assemble the juicer. And if apples are coated with wax, then they have to be peeled. If you see bruises, cut the bruises off. That's decaying matter. And it's best to remove that rather than putting that into the juice. Okay? Being attentive to the produce that you have. If you haven't grown your own apple trees and you're not certain what the apples were treated with, use your brain, use your higher intelligence to decide how to deal with the produce. So if I have apples that have wax on them, even if they are organic, sometimes there is something, organic doesn't mean that substances or practices that are toxic, somewhat toxic, very toxic to the body are not used at all. Organic is a term that's used where certain limitations are given to growers if they're following that, okay? So using blanket words, to apply across the board never really works effectively. So I've got now, you can see the juicer over here. I don't hear many people talking about this juicer online. A lot of people are going for the Nama juicers right now. They're extremely popular. Now, my history of juicing, I've used a lot of juicers, but the main juicers I used over the last years were the Green Star 5000. I had graduated from the Green Star 3000 to the graduation of the Green Star 5000. Turned out that I gave the Green Star 3000 to someone that was suffering physically, and she didn't have the money. So she got the Green Star 3000, and honestly, she didn't want to give it back. So I couldn't say anything. In a sense, my husband always told me, once you give something, count it as a gift. So she kept that juicer, and I'm sure it saved her life. She traveled back to Russia with it, and then when she returned back to the U.S., she wasn't expecting to return to the U.S. This is a change of subject, but she still had the juicer with her. So the main thing is that she was using the juicer, and that was good for her. At that time, I did purchase the Green Star 5000. Then I also had a Norwalk juicer. So the Norwalk juicer was here in Florida, and that had problems over the years. We had to replace some parts, and then recently the auger part that actually grinds up and masticates the vegetables and fruits for the pressing stage of the juicing, that sort of got wonky, and it was just too much for me to deal with. So I opted for a new juicer. And this was within my price range, okay? What I liked about this juicer is that it has a feature that the motor is very, very sturdy and hardy, and you can run this baby all day long and you won't have any trouble. Whereas some of the other juicers, you get time limitations for the amount of time that you can juice for before the motor starts to burn out and it could get damaged. So I was attracted to that feature, and that has proven to be effective. I could juice for hours on this thing and no trouble at all. Now the Nama juicers are very convenient because you can get a large hopper, you can fill it up with all your produce and literally like walk away, okay? With this, you've got to feed your produce into the juicer. That's okay, I can do it. When there is some money to afford another juicer, because right now there's no way I'm going to spend money on another juicer when I can use this one. So that's the main attachment. Then I have the auger. As you see, it's a single gear auger. There you go. So that goes right in here. And there's a filter attachment, as you can see here. Okay. That goes in here. And there's actually 3 attachments. There's 2 different styles of filters. And there's also one that's a homogenizer. So it depends what you want to do and what you're juicing. So here I'm using the larger one, that's for some of the juicier fruits. And then there's a cap that goes on the end where it has like a little disc inside there, and that just slides into place. And then you have the device, the tamper, like that. And there's a brush that came with that for cleaning. There is a little cup that you can use for the waste. You could have it sitting right there on the counter if you wanted. But what I find is, because I juice quite a lot, I just use a little fine mesh screen that I found online for $8.99 on Amazon.com. Yes, I purchased this on Amazon. Okay, here we go. And I have a cup, a plastic cup, because I'm moving quickly. There's a crystal glass that comes with it, but you got to be careful with that. You know, if you're using glass and you're moving around a lot in the kitchen. So I just put the plastic one there, and I'm not filtering it from the juicer directly beyond the filter that's in there. What I do to make things easy for me is I have a container with a fine mesh bag, and then I'll put the juice into there and then filter that out. So I don't like to leave knives sitting around because of potential injury. Put that away. And cutting boards I tend to rinse and allow them to dry off immediately. Otherwise the bamboo will tend to crack, and I don't typically like to use plastic, although if I found a good product I'm sure I would. But I use these little wood boards. I got them I must have bought somewhere for maybe $10. So okay, so now I'm going to turn the juicer on. There's 4 settings on this juicer, from a very slow setting to a higher setting to juice faster if you're in a rush kind of thing. That's the high setting. That's the slow setting. Hear the difference? Slow is rather slow, so I'm not sure how long I'm going to last doing that right now, but let's give it a go, just for the sake of the video. So the apple, go in, and there are squeaky noises because as the vegetables go through, they're actually being crushed, you know. And the fruits, that was kale that I just put through, an apple. You can hear how that's working. And now I'm putting some pineapple. And here's some, you know, the inner part of the broccoli, the stem. I just peel off the outer part and use that in the juice. That was organic broccoli, organic kale. Then I've got some I made some collard wraps with collards from the garden yesterday, and the stems were left over because I did them as tiny, sort of like little sandwich wraps. I did something different yesterday. And so I have the stems that I save, you know, and I save them for the juicing. When you're juicing, you really don't need to waste very much, because you can juice, you know, broccoli. And here's some nice grapefruit, beautiful pink grapefruits. They're very purifying to help clean the gut. So this is the reality for many people. Many people, regardless of gender, are taking care at home of all their nutrition. That's a large segment of the world lives like that. Not everybody goes to restaurants and has takeout, you know. And ultimately, since I started learning about how to care for myself years ago, I started realizing that public places and eating from random people is not very clean. So, if you can only imagine, okay, if you've ever worked in those industries serving people, or if you've ever heard the stories that people tell that do bad things, that work in the industry, I did, you know, my time where I saw what goes on behind closed doors, and I've heard stories from people that make my skin crawl. So personally, I like to prepare at home, and that's a luxury. That's something that is afforded to me right now based on my situation and what facility I have. So I'm taking advantage of that, and I count myself very fortunate, because I never had my own kitchen until recently when I married, you know. Well, going on, it's going to be, you know, we're in our 13th year of marriage now, so. And we survived. We survived all the different tests that we got. You know, everybody gets different tests. And our faith and our love carried us through. So. So usually if I'm, you know, on my own and I'm doing this and it takes many hours, you can listen to books, book reading, you can listen to talks, you can listen to different types of music or devotional topics, anything you're trying to learn. I've got the very beautiful organic kale. Everything's been pre-cleaned. I washed everything, soaked in the water here. The water we use here is well water. And if I'm cleaning things that I'm concerned about, the standard prior to me receiving the produce, then I will soak that, depending on the item, in the well water, as well as adding a little food-grade hydrogen peroxide is typically what I do. And that, of course, depends on what you're doing. Cabbage does not like to be put into water with food-grade hydrogen peroxide. It tends to turn brown, so that's something I'll rinse very well with water from home. When I lived in town, when I was down south in Fort Lauderdale before moving here to land, I had a very large distiller that I used, that I hooked up, that went to the balcony. That was quite a concoction. I wonder if I have any photographs of that anywhere, but I did have a very large distiller, and that was for all of making teas, or even for bathing and for making soup. Or at that time I was following like a program that required, sometimes I would make what was called a type of version of Hippocrates soup. And if I needed water for beverage, making like a smoothie or something, then that's what I would use. The distilled water. So there's a little clamp for closing, even if the juicer's on and it keeps going. I could keep it going, and then I take this juice, this cup of juice here. See how beautiful that is? And I put that into the filter bag, okay? Just like that. And then typically, well, I have probably just enough, because, you know, I'm juicing for 2, so I'm putting the juicer on high now, so you'll see the difference in the speed. Okay. Almost done. And I'll show you. So usually I try to make 2 full quarts of juice today. In this batch, this is my second batch of the day. It's only about 1.5 quarts, and that's okay, because I'm about to, just as soon as I finish this, and I always pray after I prepare anything, after I give thanks for this. Then my husband and I will have our portions of juice, and then I'm going to get on with loquat juicing. I've got a big bucket of loquats, and I've got other fruits, and I'll do another video for that, just to show what's going on with that. I'd like to thank you for being here, if you stayed through the video, and I wish you all the best. Thanks. Bye.